Haribo.
Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanam Jana Shalakaya Chaksharun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Shreshtam Manumapi Satchiputram Atrasya Rupam Tasya Grajamuru Purim Mathurim Goshtavatim Radha Kundam Girivaram Maho Radhika Madhavasam Prapto Yasya Pratitha Gripaya Shri Gurum Tam Natusme Vanta Kalpataru Vyashta Kripa Sindhu Bhyaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Nikhila Shruti Male Ratnamala Diti Nirajita Padapankajanta Aji Mukta Kulair Pasyamanam Paritastram Harinam Samshrayami Anarpita Charim Chirat Karunayavatirna Kalam Shumar Paitamunnatas Palarasam Svabhakti Shriyam Hari Purata Sundara Dyuti Kadamba Sandipitaha Sada Hridaye Khandaresh Purato Vasachinandana Ajanulambita Bujjo Kanakavadato Sankirtanai Kapitaro Kamalaya Takshu Vishwambaro Dvijabaro Jugadharma Pala Vande Jagat Priyakaro Karunavataro Ladini Shakti Swarupaya Gauranga Suridaya Cha Bhakta Shakti Pradhanaya Gadadhara Namastate He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Radhe Vrindavanadishi Karunamrita Vahine Kripaya Nijapadabja Dasyanmayam Pradiyatam Bhaktya Bihinaya Aparadha Lakshaya Kshiptascha Kamaditarangamadhye Kripam Maitvam Sharanam Prapanam Vrinden Maste Charanaravindam Vrinden Maste Charanaravindam Srila Gurudev ki jai, Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Pramanand, Hari Hari Bol.
Hari Hari Bol. So Dhanavad devotees. So tonight, instead of my regular class here, a very dear friend I've met over the last year and a half, 2 years, perhaps. His Holiness Pujapad BP Padmanabha Maharaj has been traveling pretty extensively and doing Harikatha, and he's here in Alachua. On Saturday and Sunday, we had our Harikatha here at the center. But I asked Maharaj kindly if he would facilitate this week's class. So normally we do Gaur Arti and Yugal Arti, but to give a little more time, I'll ask devotees who normally do Savan Stuti to do their Savan Stuti sort of personally, so we can kind of maximize the time so that we don't end up running very, very late. Maharaj will speak for probably about an hour, but we have a pretty always nice sized crowd for one on the phone, and for two, we have a number of devotees who are experienced on the phone, and they may have questions, and they may want to have discussions, and we don't want to end up with that running very late. So if we start a little bit earlier and praying to Shri Guru Varanga that Maharaj's Mangalacarana will suffice, and also asking, obviously, Bhumipati Babu, he's our most senior, and himself, I don't know if Tadon and Mahabhuti Babu are on, but I was just begging devotees that we can switch the program a little bit just to accommodate that so we can also be timely. Maharaj has agreed we was, obviously we have been doing RATHA YATRA Katha from the origins of RATHA YATRA So I offered that as Maharaj to speak, but also because we have a more mature audience on this particular conference, I also leave it to Maharaj to speak any other topics he might want to speak. He may want to speak something on RATHA YATRA and then something else, because I think it could be accommodated with the devotees we have here. And we can always have mature discussions here. Also, Maharaj will be here for another almost, I guess, week, because next Saturday and Sunday he'll again speak at the Mott here. So devotees can certainly have opportunity, if you like to. He'll give his contact information at the end. If you'd like to speak to him, he's written a book recently. If you'd like to order his book or anything like that, he'll make arrangements that you could contact him for that sort of thing. So without any further ado, if it's okay for me, Maharaj can begin to start. And devotees will come on, Maharaj, so you may hear a little bit of a ping sound. That's just devotees coming in, because devotees are coming in from all different places in the country. So some people are just getting off work, etc., etc. So you'll hear that ping from time to time. Don't let it disturb you.
Okay. So, pranam to all of you again.
The recording has started.
My gratitude for the generous invitation extended to me by Mukunda Prabhu, and of course all the assembly of Vaishnavas who are present today. It's my honor and good fortune to be able to share Harikatha, some Gaur Katha with all of you. It's a great opulence, if you will, that we have inherited by the grace of our parampara, to have the chance of engaging our tongue, our ears, our minds and hearts in this supreme sacred exercise of melting the heart by exposing ourselves to this supreme narrative, this supreme most deep descriptions of Bhagavan, his devotees, and the topmost loving interactions happening among them. So yes, today the invitation has been to share some words in connection to Sri Ratha Yatra, which is one of the very main important festivals in our Gaudiya tradition, and which will be happening in a few weeks. So it's some topic which is somehow connected with what I've been speaking these last days. Here in Alacha, we have been sharing some Gaur Katha, Gaur Lila Katha, Gaur Kathamrita, as we have chosen to present it. So it's very important, very connected to continue speaking about Mahaprabhu, about Ratha Yatra, about Sri Jagannath Dev, all this from the perspective or from the lens of Sriman Mahaprabhu, who is, if you will, the Istadev of our Gaudiya Sampradaya. And in this way, trying to prepare our hearts for celebrating, in this case, Ratha Yatra. As you can imagine, these different celebrations, Sri Ratha Yatra, Sri Janmashtami, Radhastami, Gaur Purnima, and so on, they are super extraordinary. So it's not that just we need to be reminded of them one day before, and we are totally prepared to go through them, if you will, to grasp all that they're about. So it's very important that we start to prepare our hearts and minds with some anticipation for these types of moments. And it's very typical among the circle of Vaishnavas, Vaishnav Mandal, that in advance they start to discuss maybe some weeks ago, some months ago sometimes, about whatever specific festivity will be happening eventually. And so gradually they are entering into the proper mood, into the proper conception, into the proper realm of prayer, as to grasp and connect with that specific reality that is being revealed in that particular moment. And I always remember, or like to think about in times like those of Mahaprabhu, when he or other devotees, great devotees, will go in parikram from, let's say, Navadvip or Jagannath Puri to Vrindavan, or Navadvip to Jagannath Puri, and so on, by walking or by cart, whatever. As you may imagine, this may take many days, many weeks. But in that long period of time, while approaching the Dham, they will, in anticipation, in advance, start to be there. They arrived at the Dham before arriving at the Dham physically. They get there mentally before their bodies enter officially the Dham. Interestingly, nowadays, the dynamics are a little bit different. Sometimes we may take just a plane and we are in the Dham physically in a few hours, but we will arrive there mentally maybe in a few weeks. After 3 weeks, we feel, okay, now I'm home. But after 2 weeks, we have to leave. So these things can happen. It has its pros and cons for sure. So in this particular case, we are trying to enter into Sri Ratha Yatra with some anticipation. We have started celebration, the Mahotsava, as we were saying these days. The very opportunity to speak about this is in itself a Mahotsav. Tadeva Sashvam Manaso Mahotsavan, says the Bhagavatam as it says. Sri Harikatha is a perpetual festival for the mind. Tadeva Ramyam Ruchiram Navam Navam. It's supremely pleasurable and at every moment becomes new. Ananta Katarasasya. So in this way, the very fact of engaging in Harikatha is in itself a festival. Harikatha is a festival. Krishna himself is a festival in itself. His beauty is a celebration, a festivity. And so just trying to honor that reality somehow through our words and minds is in itself a celebration. So in this way, we are already in the celebration of Sri Ratha Yatra. I'm preparing gradually to approach the day of the official celebration, if you will. So in connection to Ratha Yatra, I'd like to, of course, share today some thoughts from our specific, unique Gaudiya perspective. We belong to that particular school of thought, to that particular sampradaya. Sampradaya means that something which gives pradaya, sam, a particular full a conception of reality, school of thought. So in our Gaudiya Sampradaya, we have a very unique, specific approach, a very specific approach to divinity, a very specific approach to Shastra, to Siddhanta, and so on. Like every single Sampradaya will have their particular take on all this. So we, as a Gaudiya Sampradaya, have a very particular subjective take on reality as a whole. And that's what makes one Sampradaya different from the other. And of course, all of their proposals are valid because reality is like a multifaceted jewel which can be addressed from so many angles. And there is place for variety of subjective experience in transcendence. So we in the Gaudiya Sampradaya celebrate a particular approach to reality through the lens, through the heart of Sriman Mahaprabhu and his associates. So I don't know, for example, something that shows this very clearly is how our Gaudiya acharyas, like our Shastra Gurus, the Goswamis, will read verses such as Krishna Varnam tu Sa Krishnam, Sangapangastra Parshadam, Yaknyai Sankirtana Prayaya, Jayanti Sumedasaha. For us Gaudiyas, this verse will undoubtedly speak about Mahaprabhu immediately. And so many details, and our Goswamis have explained this verse in such detail. But for other Vaishnavas, even from other schools, not necessarily this verse is pointing to Mahaprabhu. And it's not that we need to demonize them because they're not seeing Mahaprabhu. It's just that they are receiving very specific bhakti samskars that will take them to see reality, to see Shastra, to read in between the lines even in a particular way, which may differ from ours. But again, there is place for this diversity. So many verses in Shastra will be read, interpreted by members from Puran Sampradaya in one way, by members of other Sampradaya in another way. And there is place for such reading of reality. Some devotees, as we know from, let's say, Sri Sampradaya, their particular subjective take will be Vishnu is God, and Krishna is an avatar of Vishnu. And interestingly, they will keep that view for eternity. They will get to Vaikuntha and they will still have that particular perspective, which is valid for eternity. So in one sense, there is place for such differences of opinion for eternity. while of course we Gaudias will have our own points to make regarding Krishna's two Bhagavan Swayam, and how Narayan is an anga of Krishna and not the opposite. And we will have our own way of justifying that, and there is place for that in eternity as well. So this is a very interesting point that I'm trying to present in introduction to our particular Gaudiya take on Sri Jagannath and Sri Ratha Yatra. For example, in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, when Sri Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami is speaking about Mahaprabhu as none different from Krishna, and eventually he describes Sri Gaur Sundar as Paratattva Simha, which means the highest limit of the absolute truth. Then Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami, interestingly, after saying such a thing, such a bold statement, this person who some other people may consider just one mere boy, special devotee from Bengal, but he's saying, no, he's actually Krishna in his most volcanic, ecstatic moment, the highest reach of the absolute in terms of experience of rasa. Krishna is tasting something as Gaur that he has not had an experience of in Braj, and so on. So after stating this and saying Paratattva Simha, that's Mahaprabhu, Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami will say, to call him Shirodaka Sai Vishnu does not add to his glory. But such words from the lips of a sincere devotee cannot be false, he mentions. All possibilities abide in him, for he is the primeval Lord. And some say that Krishna is an incarnation of Shirodaka Sai Vishnu. None of these statements is impossible. Each is as correct as the others. Of course, with this, Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami is not saying you can think whatever you like and that can be correct in eternity, but there are certain shastric parameters in which different phases of the absolute are possible in transcendence, and it's possible to conceive that aspect as the highest according to one's subjective view. The Srimad Bhattan is saying Srutekshita. Srutekshita means one will see through hearing. So we will see, or we will conceive different forms of the divine according to what the Shruti tells us, according to what revelation is describing to us. It's not that you can just think, okay, for me, God has this form and that form, and I can imagine whatever I like. No, there are certain parameters, certain shastric context, perimeter, and in that context, there are unlimited forms of the absolute, but not just anything, whatever I may like to think. So my point with all this is that we as Gaudiyas, we have a particular take on reality, particular addressing of it, and we will express a very unique approach to reality as Gaudiyas based on Shastra and coming through the lens of Sri Chaitanya Dev. So this Ratha Yatra that we are speaking about today is no exception to that rule. We as Gaudiyas, we will conceive Ratha Yatra in a very unique way. Not everyone in the world who participates or who celebrates Ratha Yatra will do it with the same theistic conception that we Gaudiyas are having. So that's a very unique way we are addressing, conceiving Ratha Yatra, Jagannath Dev, and that's coming from Mahaprabhu, from Mahaprabhu's gift, which of course is totally unique. What Mahaprabhu is coming to give is something that is has been unheard of, if you will, before. There's a very important, interesting example in this connection, and in connection to the uniqueness of how Gaudiyas conceive Ratha Yatra, and this is in connection to Prataparudra Maharaj. He was the king of Puri at the time when Mahaprabhu eventually stayed there. So one moment it is said that Prataparudra Maharaj, at that moment Mahaprabhu was not in Puri, he had departed for South India, but some of his devotees were there arriving, and Prataparudra Maharaj is on the rooftop of his palace, and he's looking with some at the distance and seeing this ecstatic, if you will, religious performance of the Prem Sankirtan of Gauranga's associates, Nityananda Prabhu and others dancing and rolling on the ground and crying ecstatically, different sattvic bhavs erupting in their bodies. So Prataparudra Maharaj never saw something like that before. So, and he was a person quite accustomed to witnessing religious diversity, because in Jagannath Puri, people approach Jagannath with different conceptions. And there are Christians, and there are Buddhists, and there are followers of Shankaracharya, and there are Sri Vaishnavas and other forms of Vaishnavism. So my point is that the king was accustomed to see different expressions of spirituality, but he had never seen something like that before. What the associates of Mahaprabhu were exhibiting while singing and dancing. So he asked, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was there, Gopinath Acharya was there. So he asked, what's this? I've never seen this particular expression of spirituality. So the reply was, Chaitanya Shristi E Prem Sankirtan. Gopinath Acharya replied, this is the exclusive creation of Sri Chaitanya, and it is called Prem Sankirtan. So again, it's a very unique product, if you want to put it like that, that is coming from the heart of Sri Gaur Sundar, extending through his associates, and we call it Prem Sankirtan. So in this way, my point is, we are in a place called Jagannath Puri. Hopefully we are traveling in our minds there, because here in Harikatha, Shravanam, Kirtana has to take us to contemplation, Smaranam, and somehow it's important that we learn to travel in our minds and be led by the vehicle of Harikatha, and to locate ourselves in these particular settings. So Jagannath Puri, as you may know, is a very pluralistic religious city, as I mentioned. Jagannath is in the center for everyone, basically. Jai Jagannath, as you go, Vrindavan is Shri Radhe Radhe, Puri is Jai Jagannath. So Jagannath is in the center for everyone, but he's conceived in very different ways. That's an important point. Very differently by many. There we will find Christians there who have their particular conception of Jagannath. I've seen them. There are Buddhists there who have their particular take on Sri Jagannath as well. You have followers of, as I mentioned, Advaita Vedanta. Even they are attending Jagannath in the temple, interestingly. And again, among many other designations, we have Gaudiyas also in Jagannath Puri. So every one of them is having their particular conception on Sri Jagannath and Ratha Yatra. So today we will concentrate on, of course, which is our Gaudiya conception, our Gaudiya understanding of this particular festivity. And Jagannath Puri and Ratha Yatra, by extension, somehow are connected with two important dhams, one of them being Dwarka and one of them being Kurukshetra. Of course, also connected to Vrindavan and so on. But in many ways, Jagannath Puri has been described by our acharyas in one sense as Dwarka, in one sense as Kurukshetra mainly. So today, with your permission, I'll try to concentrate mostly in the direction of Kurukshetra. Sri Jagannath Puri and Ratha Yatra in connection to Sri Kurukshetra Dhama. Since Mahaprabhu's own experience of Ratha Yatra, as we will see, is intimately connected with this particular realm and something very important, very crucial that happened there. And probably when I will be lecturing on the official day of Ratha Yatra, I will be, I think, in Finland in a few weeks. We will speak about Sri Ratha Yatra, but in connection to, through the lens of Dwarka Dham, if you will. So, of course, what happened in Kurukshetra, to give some context, many of us may say, of course, the most popular event, if you want to put it like that, happening in Kurukshetra may be the speaking of the Bhagavad Gita. And of course, that's true, and that's very crucial and important for us. But also something, if you will, even more important, more intimate, and therefore not that well known, happened as well in Kurukshetra before Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna in the battlefield. So what happened in Kurukshetra, of course, this is a long discussion. I'll try to be brief. This requires lots of series for speaking about this. So in Kurukshetra, on the occasion of a solar eclipse, Sri Krishna, who was at the time residing in Dwarka, he went to that Kurukshetra for the celebration of this religious event, solar eclipse. And interestingly, the Brajavasis also went there. So there was a meeting between Sri Krishna and the Brajavasis after basically 100 years, if you will, of separation. So you can imagine the emotional density, the emotional content of that particular moment. So as we know, Krishna is there with his entourage, Dwarka entourage. He's as a prince there, as we know. He's mounted on a big elephant. He has a bejeweled crown, no peacock feather, no flute is there, no cows, and so on. He's Dwarkish Krishna. And he's surrounded by a particular retinue, more connected with Aishvarya, that with the principle of extreme madhurya or intimacy that we find in the Braj. So the Brajavasis arrive there with the carts, with their offerings of ghee and milk products, seeming apparently seeming like uncivilized people to the aristocracy of Dwarka, if you will. And Yashoda, for example, is running and telling to the gatekeepers of the event, like, call Krishna, and the gatekeepers will ask, and who are you? Not recognizing, actually, not knowing about Yashoda and the Braja Lila. And basically Yashoda will say, I'm his mother. And you can imagine when the gatekeepers tell Krishna, there is one lady there calling you. She says she's your mother. So you can imagine how Krishna becomes affected by that. He immediately runs, and some acharyas describe it, although Krishna at that time had more than 100 years old, he jumped into Yashoda's lap and was breastfed by her. So her Vatsalya prevailed, if you will. So in this way, long story short, Krishna welcomes the different Brajavasis, Nanda, Yashoda, friends, different departments of relationships, different rasas. And eventually, he has the opportunity of meeting the gopis in a secluded place. Sri Radha is there, and the gopis are there. So they are meeting face to face. And as we know, there's some conversation there. Krishna starts to speak somewhat formally and tries to speak in a more philosophical way, trying to behave in a more formal, bureaucratical way, if you will. And Radha and the gopis are trying to make a very important point, as we know, which is, we want you back in Vrindavan. And at one point, Krishna is telling them, of course, you can join me in Dwarka, you can come with me. And of course, they are asking him, but where are you? Where is Vrindavan? Where is the Jamuna? Where is the forest? Where is your flute? Where is the peacock feather? Where are you? As we know you. Where is Braja Krishna? This is Dwarka Krishna, but there's another version of you. We want Braja Krishna. So the point is, Sri Radha is just in front of Krishna, but she cannot meet with him. She cannot fully, the union cannot be fully consummated. So there is such a necessity of service at that moment. Interestingly, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in this connection, will mention a very interesting idea. He'll say, I would like to leave my body in Kuruksetra, which is a very unusual statement for Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Generally, you will hear they will leave their body in one of these three main dhams, Jagannath Puri, Vrindavan, or Navadvip. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentioned, I want to live in Kuruksetra, although interestingly, he never made any practical arrangements for that to happen. So the point here is he wants to make a point. And what's the point? That in Kuruksetra, in this particular moment we are describing, Sri Radha is in front of Krishna, just next to him after a century of separation, but she cannot unite with him, given this particular circumstance. So she is in her moment of greatest necessity. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is understanding this. At that moment, Sri Radha is in her moment of greatest necessity. I want to enter that moment, die there, and serve there forever. I want to assist her in her greatest necessity for eternity. So that's what gives rise to a spiritual identity. Spiritual identity will come through a spiritual identification with the necessity of service, particular necessity of service. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is teaching this. He's fully identified with a particular necessity of service to his Swamini or her Swamini. And the more we progress in our bhakti project, if you will, the more the necessity of service will become more and more specific, because Raganuga Bhakti is the path of specificity. So the more we progress on this marg, on this path, all this necessity of service will become more nuanced and more specific. And the final result of that a spiritual identification with the necessity of service will result in a spiritual identity. And we could say, in connection, since we invoke the name of Sri Thakur Bhaktivinoda, that's one of the reasons why he's worshipping Sri Sri Gaur Gadadhar and his sister there, which of course is Sri Sri Radha and Krishna in their Gaur Lila version, if you will, which gives us the entrance into the service also of Krishna Lila. But also Gaur Gadadhar represents the same principle. Gaur, as we spoke these days, is Krishna in his moment of greatest necessity, wanting to taste Radha Bhav, having this very intense necessity and curiosity of having this particular experience. So Mahaprabhu is Krishna in the moment of his greatest necessity, and Gadadhar is Radha in her moment of greatest necessity. Why? Because if Krishna is in his moment of greatest necessity, then Krishna's greatest necessity becomes Radha's greatest necessity, because she's totally identified with whatever Krishna needs. I'll live to satisfy that need. So in my point is, Gaur Gadadhar represents the divine couple, we could say, in their moment of greatest necessity, and therefore Bhaktivinoda Thakur is worshipping there forever. They're fully identified with this necessity of service. So that's a very, very beautiful, for me at least, meditation ideal that starts to unfold in connection with Ratha Yatra and what's going on here in Kurukshetra. So going back to Kurukshetra for a moment, again, the gopis are expressing the greatness of their love, and eventually Krishna, after different attempts to pacify them, if you will, he will tell them, Mayi bhaktirhi bhutanam amritatvaya kalpate disya jadasin matsneho bhavati nammadapana. Famous verse, 82, chapter 82 of the 10th canto in the Bhagavatam. So basically Krishna here is saying, render service to me, bhakti to me, qualifies any living being for amrita, for eternal life. But by your good fortune, you gopis, you have developed a special loving attitude toward me, by which you have obtained me. So basically Krishna is saying, mostly everyone serves me to attain eternity, to attain mukti, to be liberated. But you love me in such a way that I'm purchased by you, actually. No, you don't care for mukti, you don't care for moksha. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his Sarartha Darshani, he's further clarifying this, mentioning that Krishna is basically saying here, by bhakti, one can obtain relatively easy amritatvaya, or liberation. But you have attained a type of affection for me that not only is your good fortune that you have attained that, but it's my good fortune that you love me in such a way. Basically, ultimately, Krishna is expressing his depth of love with the gopis, like he did in the Rasa Panchadhyaya, Napareham Nirabadya Sanjayam, and so on. So the hidden meaning of this verse is basically Krishna saying to the gopis, your affection is dragging me to you by force. Which again, you may start to connect this with the Ratha Yatra. The boat is dragging the car, dragging Jagannath by the strength of their love. So Krishna here is saying, your affection is dragging me to you by force. It brings me close to you. It assures that very soon I will come to remain permanently with you. So very intense moment. Try to enter into that particular moment. So you can only imagine, if Krishna is saying these things, if Krishna is experiencing these things in Kurukshetra, how much this meeting that he had with the gopis in Kurukshetra, how much that meeting affected Krishna speaking of the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna some years after that. And of course, our Acharya had been very expert in pointing to that and explaining different verses from the Gita, like the Chatur Shloki, Sarvadharmam Parityaja, Apichet Suduracharo, and some others, in such a way that ultimately Krishna is totally absorbed in what he experienced with the gopis in Kurukshetra some years before. Although he's overtly speaking to Arjuna and to the whole humanity, in its most confidential level, he's absorbed in Braja. So Krishna is telling this to the gopis in Kurukshetra. The strength of your love is dragging me towards you. And the gopis, when hearing Krishna, they will conclude with another verse, very famous one, which also is very relatable to what's going on in Ratha Yatra for us Gaudias. So what's the verse? The verse says, Ahuschate nalina nava padara bindam Yogeshwarai hridi vichintyam agadhabodhai samsara kupa patito taranavalamvam gyeham jusham apimanasya diyat sadana. So a few verses after what Krishna said, the gopis are basically speaking to him, directing to him, oh, you who have navel like a lotus flower, your feet are the only shelter of those who have fallen deep into samsara. Remember, the gopis in their humility will think, we are conditioned souls. We love you, but we are just ordinary cowherd girls from the village. They say your feet are worshipped and meditated upon by great mystic yogis and highly learned philosophers. These great personalities approach you from a particular way. But we, they conclude saying, we wish that those same lotus feet may be awakening within our hearts, although we are only ordinary persons engaged in household affairs. So may your feet, those sacred feet that these great personalities worship in different ways, yogis, jnanis, and so on, we ordinary cowherd girls, may those feet be awakened in our hearts. So what's the meaning of may your feet be awakened in our hearts? Basically, the gopis, what is the heart of the gopis? Vrindavan. That's the stage. That's their heart. So they are basically saying, may your feet be awakened in our heart. That means may your feet walk again back in Braj. So again, this connects to the previous verse. Krishna is saying, your affection is dragging me towards you. And they are saying, and we exist only in Braj. So may your feet walk back there. Our hearts is Braj. Without Braj, we cannot unite with you. Without Braj, there is no Braj Krishna. That's our Krishna, the gopis are saying. That's our Prananath, our Praneshwar. Our Krishna is Braja Krishna. That's our deity also that we worship, as we say the other day. Aradhyo Bhagavam Brajesa Tanayas Tadhama Brindavanam Ramya Kachim Pasana Brajabadhur Vargena Va Kalpita Srimad Bhagavatam Pramanamamalam Prema Pumartu Maham Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhur Matamidam Tatra Dharana Param. This is a famous verse which speaks about who we are as Gaudias. And basically the first line says, Aradhyo Bhagavan, our worshipable Bhagavan is Brajesa Tanayas, which means the son of Nanda Maharaj. That's our Krishna. Krishnastu, when we say Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, we are not saying Mathura Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, Dwarka Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. We are saying Braja Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. So in this way, the gopis are imploring to Krishna, may your feet walk again back in Braj. You destroy darkness with your presence. But sometimes the gopis say, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments on this verse, you are like a sun who destroys darkness, Krishna Surya Sun. But we now are being scorched by the heat of the philosophical knowledge you are speaking to us. Remember, Krishna was trying to console the gopis through gyan, if you will. But the gopis are saying, we are just like chakora birds who only live by drinking the moonlight that is radiating from the moon of your beautiful face, Krishna Chandra, Mukhar Chandra. So we want to see that face, you know where. Therefore, come back to Vrindavan and bring us to life with your lila, with your pastime, such as the Rasa Lila. Like the moon is giving life with their presence and moonbeams. So in other words, my point here by quoting these verses from Kurukshetra meeting is that the meeting should be in place where you previously had pastimes with us. That's what the gopis implied to Krishna. And that place is Gokul. That's our homes. That's our hearts. We perceive Vrindavan as our natural home. There our desires will be fulfilled, not in Dwarka. Remember, Krishna is inviting the gopis to be in a one-on-one platform with the queens, which is a totally different DNA and psychology, if you will. So again, going back, Ratha Yatra, represents this, symbolizes this return of Krishna to Braj by the strength of the love of the Brajavasis. This is the main point of the Ratha Yatra, how the love of Vrindavan is conquering the absolute in all of its other forms and drag him back by force. This is the symbology of the carts of Jagannath and the boats taking the car from one place to another. As you know, the Ratha Yatra will converge into Gundicha Mandir, which symbolizes Vrindavan. So this Ratha Yatra is intimately, as we can see, connected with Kuruksetra, with what happened at Kuruksetra. And Mahaprabhu himself, we'll turn now to how Mahaprabhu himself celebrated, if you will, experienced Ratha Yatra. This same feeling that the gopis have expressed in Kuruksetra, this was expressed by Sri Gaur Sundar in Ratha Yatra. The Ratha Yatra pastimes are very important. Practically, they can be considered the very heart of the Madhya Lila in Chaitanya Charitamrita, centered around that. And there Mahaprabhu, celebrating Ratha Yatra, dancing, singing, he's exhibiting unparalleled ecstasy. For example, in Radha Bhav, dancing. It is described, for example, that when Krishna-das Kaviraj says, when Prabhu jumped and danced, he was wonderfully transformed, basically. And it's described that all 8 sattvic bhavs, Asta Sattvic Vikar, erupted simultaneously in him. So all of them in very unique ways. It is said that the hairs of his body stood on end, and that his body was compared like a smooth silk, one tree called Simuli, with thorns. The hairs of his body seemed like thorns. His teeth were chattering, and people feared that Mahaprabhu's teeth will fall from his mouth. It is described that blood was pouring like perspiration from his pores. Try to imagine. He was stammering and trying to call Jagannath, but he could just say ja, ja, ga, ga, ja, ja, ga, ga. He was not even able to finish the whole word. And his eyes were pouring water like a fountain, basically, drenching everyone on all sides. And his hue or complexion changed from golden to reddish brown to the color of a jasmine. It is also mentioned. Sometimes he will be stunned in his stamba, not moving. Sometimes he will roll on the ground. His limbs will become like hard, like sticks of dry wood, and did not move. Or sometimes he will lose his breath. He will fall on the ground. And it is said that when the devotees saw that, they almost lost their lives, because seeing him losing his life breath, all his parishads were losing their life breath. So in this way, Krishna-das Kaviraj Goswami is describing Mahaprabhu's ecstatic symptoms while participating in Ratha Yatra. Tears pouring from his eyes, mucus running from his nose, foam pouring from his mouth. All this in a very beautiful way, like streams of nectar falling from the moon. This type of comparisons were made by Krishna-das Kaviraj. So in the midst of this ecstatic celebration of Ratha Yatra, Sriman Mahaprabhu, and again, I'm just summarizing this section because so many details, so many things we can mention for a long time, for eternity. And that's, of course, our good fortune. But I would like to concentrate on this particular verse. As you may know, at one point in the Ratha Yatra, Mahaprabhu will invoke a verse from secular poetry. Interestingly, he's not singing a particular religious song, but invoking a secular verse in the context of a religious festival, which will be like a parallel, like if you are now in a Ratha Yatra and you start to sing some pop song or something like that, that is just a hit in the charts nowadays. And everyone will look at you like, I mean, you are being supposed to sing this song or that song, but you shouldn't be singing. You shouldn't even be hearing these type of things. What to speak of singing them in Shikshastakam, in Ratha Yatra. But Mahaprabhu did that, interestingly. So somehow some devotees were disconcerted. Why Mahaprabhu? I mean, they're already disconcerted by the ecstatic symptoms of Mahaprabhu. So they could tell this is not ordinary person. So even if such a golden volcano of divine love, as Srila Sridhar Maharaj will put, even if he's singing a pop song, if you will, he's such an extraordinary figure that there must be some reason for that. So which is the verse, the particular secular verse that he invoked? coming quoted also by Sri Rupa Goswami in his Padyavali. The verse says like this: Ya kumara harasa eva hivaras ta eva chaitrakshapas te chanmilita malati surabhaya prodha kadamba nila sa chaiva smita thapi tatra surata vyapara lila vidho Reva dhasiveta sweetarutale tita samut kantate. So the translation of the verse, one girl is speaking this verse, speaking about her beloved. She says that that very personality who stole away my heart during my youth is now again my master. These are the same moonlight nights of the month of Chaitra. The same fragrance of malati flowers is there, and the same sweet breezes are blowing from the Kadamba forest. In our intimate relationship, I'm also the same lover, yet still my mind is not happy here. I am eager to go back to that place on the bank of the Reva under the Betasi tree. That is my desire. So this is a song that was invoked by Mahaprabhu. This verse, Krishnadas Kaviraj mentions only Swarup Damodar could understand the meaning of that verse, apart from Mahaprabhu. But eventually we realize that someone else understood the meaning of this verse, and that person is Srila Rupa Goswami Pad. So Srila Rupa Goswami Pad eventually composed the verse in which he kind of decrypted the inner meaning of what Mahaprabhu sang in Ratha Yatra, which is a parallel verse, but unfolding, explaining in clear way how Sri Radha was feeling in Kuruksetra when seeing Sri Krishna. Remember what we mentioned before. This verse is quoted by Rupa Goswami next to the previous one in his Padyavali. And the verse says like this: Priya soyam Krishna sahachari Kuruksetra militas tata hamsa Radha Tadivam ubhayo sangama sukham Tata pyanta khelan madhura murali panchamayushe mano me kalindi pulina bipinaya sprihayati. So this is a verse spoken by Sri Radha in Kuruksetra, in the particular setting that we described before, being with Krishna. In this particular scenario, not in Braj. So Sri Radha is speaking to a friend, saying, my dear friend, now I have met my very old and dear friend Krishna on this field of Kurukshetra. I am the same Radha, and now we are meeting together. It is very pleasant, but still, I would like to go to the bank of the Jamuna beneath the trees of the forest there. I wish to hear the vibration of his sweet flute playing the fifth note within that forest of Vrindavan. So, as you can see, Srila Rupa Goswami knew his master's mind so well that when he heard Mahaprabhu singing this secular verse, he was immediately understanding, oh, my Gaur Sundar, my Prabhu, now is in Radha Bhav, and he's expressing himself in Parokshabad in a covert way, in direct speech, Vyanjana Vritti, because that's the language of lovers, that's the language of Madhurya Bhav, that's the language of Rasa Shastra specifically. So he's speaking, by invoking secular poetry, actually he's expressing himself as Radha, in Radha Bhav, and what Radha is feeling in Kurukshetra in this precise moment. And this Ratha Yatra is basically depicting this moment. So Rupa Goswami composed this verse of his own, and as we know, eventually Mahaprabhu, when he went to visit Rupa Goswami to his Bhajan Kutir, and he found this verse written on one little leaf on the rooftop of his cottage, and Mahaprabhu blushed when he read the verse, and he lovingly slapped Srila Rupa Goswami's face, telling him like, how can you know me that well? He felt embarrassed, like, you know me that much, how you know my heart of hearts in such a way? You know me too much. This way, that's why Srila Narottam Das Thakur, when he composed his pranam mantra to Rupa Goswami, say what? Sri Chaitanya Manoavishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale. So yan Rupa Kadamaham Dadati Sapadantikam. So Sri Chaitanya Manoavishtam, those desires that were in the mind of Mahaprabhu, Stapitam Yena Bhutale, he, Sri Rupa, was able to establish them in the world. So first he knew what was going on Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mind in every single level. This specific pastime shows that, how capable Sri Rupa Goswami was to decipher, if you will, to read Mahaprabhu's mind and translate that in his poetry, in his books, in his writings, when he's describing what Mahaprabhu is about, what Mahaprabhu's feelings are about. So that's why we Sri Rupa Goswami for us holds such a special position as Rupa Nuga Vaishnavas. And Mahaprabhu himself is confirming this by slapping Sri Rupa, basically, by implying, you know me too much. Similarly to when Mahaprabhu was conversing, speaking with Sri Ramananda Rai in their samvad, their conversation. And at one point of the conversation, as you know, this is another total separate long conversation, but Sri Rai Ramananda starts to describe Prema Vilas Vivarta and the union of Radha and Krishna and so on. And eventually all this is connected to Mahaprabhu himself, who is the solution to this dilemma in which Radha and Krishna want to become one in love. And at that point, Mahaprabhu will cover the mouth of Sri Rai Ramananda, implying the same. Till before he will say, Rai Ramananda, that's superficial, speak more, that's superficial. Eho Bahya are, continue speaking, augment the truth. But at this point, he's covering his mouth, like implying, okay, you're telling too much, we can stop there. So similarly, this happened with Mahaprabhu in connection to Sri Rupa, when he composed this verse in which he described openly, clearly, actually what Mahaprabhu meant during Ratha Yatra, in full Radha Bhav, expressing what Sri Radha felt in Kurukshetra and how Ratha Yatra is intimately connected to this precise moment. So in this way, for us, Gaudiyas, Gaudiya Vaishnavas, Ratha Yatra is seen in connection. In another connections, as I mentioned, it can be tied with Dwarka and the famous narrative of Nava Vrindavan and so on. But in connection to Mahaprabhu himself, we will conceive Ratha Yatra in this particular connection, with this very specific moment in Kurukshetra, and as I mentioned in the beginning, with this very specific service necessity that will come as a result of that. So a few words before finishing, with your permission, going back to Kurukshetra for a moment. Interestingly, if you pay attention, this is the only time we could say that the Braja Gopis left Vrindavan, went out of Vrindavan. We have heard, of course, Nanda Maharaj, some of Krishna's friends went with Krishna to Mathura and so on, but the Gopis remained in Braj at that time. But for this particular occasion, the solar eclipse in Kurukshetra, the Braja Gopis are leaving Braj for the only time in their lives, basically. Why? To make a very particular point. They left Braj to make a point about Braj. Of course, we could say literally, if you follow the Lila narrative of the Bhagavatam, it's not that the Krishna, in one sense, brought back from Kurukshetra back to Braj, in one sense. But the point is, in a substantial way, that's actually going on. Ratha Yatra represents this particular point, this particular idea. Even if Krishna were not to return literally to Braj, physically, if you want to put it like that, he actually returned internally by the rope of affection of the Brajavasis, by the strength of their prem, especially by the strength of Sri Radha's prem. And of course, Mahaprabhu is all about tasting that, that Radha Bhav. So the gopis wanted to make this important point over and over again. And sometimes that's seen in Shastra. To make a point, certain personalities will act in a particular way. Like I mentioned, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he said, I would like to die in Kurukshetra. But he never made the arrangement for that to happen. But he wanted to make that point. I want to enter in that eternal moment, in that eternal portal in which Sri Radha is in a very unique necessity of service. So I want to be there near her and be willing to offer my life millions of times to save her life. That's what we spoke some weeks ago with the devotees, that actually the dynamics of the Leela and the loving interaction between Sri Radha and Krishna is so emotionally intense that themselves in separation from each other so many moments during the day, they're about to die at many moments during the day. And we eventually will have to assist them to survive and not die, basically, even though it may seem extreme. That will be the dynamics in the Nitya Leela. Part of our seva is to behave and serve and assist in such a way that on a daily basis, we have to save the life of God, if you will. So my point is, better we prepare for that, better we take this seriously. But my point, going back, is Bhaktivinoda Thakur wanted to make the point. He didn't make the arrangements to live in Kurukshetra, to leave his body there, but he wanted to make this point of the importance of service in the moment of the greatest necessity. Srila Sridhar Maharaj will say, in that moment, service of the greatest necessity will bring forth the greatest remuneration. And the greatest remuneration, of course, is a further capacity to offer further service. Or look, when Gadadhar Pandit, he wanted to join Mahaprabhu when he decided to go to Vrindavan, Mahaprabhu told him, but you accept a Kshetra Sannyas. You cannot leave Braj. And he said, to hell with my Kshetra Sannyas. I accepted that vow only to be with you. But if this vow is creating an obstacle from joining from you, I will break my vow to maintain my higher vow, which is to always be with you. That's what Sachi asked me when we were young, never leave him. So this is also an important point there. And of course, we know Gadadhar Pandit crossed the boundaries of Jagannath Puri, break the vow and make his point. No, he breaks the vow and makes his point. In other words, I'm hearing myself, the audio is repeating somehow. I don't know if you can make some arrangement. Yeah. So this is an important point, which is we have to know when to break our vows as to keep our deeper vows. I mean, I'm not promoting breaking vows, but as the saying goes, only those who follow the rules very nicely know when to break them, to accept a higher principle, a deeper principle. So the real point of the Braja Devis, the Braja Gopikas here in leaving Braj, as I mentioned, they left Braj once to go to Kurukshetra. The real point of their leaving Braj is to actually promote Braj, to establish the glories and position of Braj, without which Krishna is no longer Krishna, if you will. And Braj is a particular playground or stage, which of course corresponds with a particular type of love. So in one sense, they never left Braj, as Krishna would say never to leave Braj in one sense as well. Or when Srila Prabhupada was leaving Braj, and some people ask him, why you are leaving Braj? And he say, I'm not leaving Braj. Actually, those who were staying physically in Vrindavan and thinking he's going out of Vrindavan, those who were thinking like that were not in Vrindavan, because they were not able to understand he's actually taking Vrindavan everywhere, wherever he's going. So the Braja Gopis in the same way, they externally left Vrindavan, but they only were there to promote the glories of Vrindavan, to show how the love of Vrindavan, especially the love of Sri Radha, makes Krishna who he is. And how the very form of Krishna, as I like to say, is the byproduct of the love of his devotees. According to a particular type of prem, the absolute will take a particular form. Just look at Jagannath. He has a very particular form, which is the result of a very particular type of prem impacting on him. Jagannath is called, Sri Gaur Govinda Maharaj will call Mahabhav Prakash, this expression of the highest type of emotional surcharging. So this Jagannath is Krishna expressing himself drunk in divine love, intoxicated by prem and separation from Sri Radha, carved out, as I like to put, Jagannath is a wooden figure, if you will, and he's carved out by Radha's love, more than other feature of the Absolute. If you want to speak about a very unique deity and feature of the Absolute in our tradition, that's Jagannath. He's carved, but carved because of a particular type of prem. Sri Brahma is saying this in the Bhagavatam. Tvam bhakti yoga paribhavita hritsaroja ase sritakshita pato nanunata pumsam yadhyadhyata udughaya vibhavayanti tatta bapu pranayase sadhanugrahaya. He's basically praying to Bhagavan, saying that the devotees see you through their ears, as we mentioned, by the proper process of proper hearing, and their hearts become cleansed, and you take seat there, and you are so merciful to your devotees that you manifest yourself in their particular form in transcendence, in which they always think of you. So in other words, this verse is making the point, the form that Krishna will adopt corresponds with a particular type of bhakti. According to the bhakti you have, Bhagavan will present himself in a particular way. And in this way, we Gaudias will conceive Jagannath in this particular connection with Sri Radha and separation of her, and showing the greatness of Vrindavan's love, all of which is very nicely portrayed in Ratha Yatra. And that's how we understand Jagannath Puri as Gaudias. Jagannath Puri is also called Sri Kshetra. And for us, Sri has to do ultimately with Sri Radha. She's Sarva Lakshmi, Sarva, all Devis come from her. So those who follow Sri Radha will see, oh, Sri Kshetra is basically the place in which Sri Radha's Madhurya is manifested to such a degree that Krishna becomes what he becomes as Jagannath. I always remember how Srila Gaur Govinda Maharaj used to mention this. Like Mahaprabhu, why Mahaprabhu stayed in Sri Kshetra? Because again, this is the feel of Radha's mood, and Mahaprabhu wants to taste that. And in Sri Kshetra, Jagannath is Krishna in separation from Radha. And Gaur basically is Krishna in the mood of Radha in separation from Krishna. You can imagine what that union must be. Krishna in separation from Radha, Jagannath, Radha, if you will, in separation of Krishna, Mahaprabhu, and the two meeting with each other. So when Mahaprabhu is seeing Jagannath, he's seeing actually Shyam Sundar. That's the Jagannath he's seeing, Tribanga Lalita and so on. And when Jagannath is seeing Gaur, he's actually seeing Sri Radha. So this is the, if you will, reunion of Sri Radha and Krishna. This is sung in famous Jagannathasakam, the 6th verse, Rasanando Radha Sarasa Bhapura Lingana Sukho. Jagannath is relishing rasa, and he's embracing Sri Radha, his beloved. So basically, some words I wanted to share with you in connection with Sri Ratha Yatra, which is a very, as you can see, as you can grasp at least, hopefully, a very deep esoteric festival, a festival of great need, in which the Absolute is in great need. I like to speak about also, always, usually, and with this I'm concluding, about Jagannath, like Mahaprabhu sometimes is described as the most volcanic face of the Absolute, but also the most vulnerable. God in his most needy moment, he's with a great need. So somehow we can make that connection with Jagannath also. Sri Jagannath is in great need, in great separation. He's expressing great vulnerability. So we could even call Ratha Yatra, instead of the festival of chariots, we could call Ratha Yatra the festival of vulnerability. And I remember some days ago, I was speaking with a friend of mine, and how sometimes Ratha Yatra, devotees may organize Ratha Yatra, but sometimes it can end up being just more like a social event where everyone brings their best clothes and their best smile, if you will. And somehow we lose sight of the depth of what's actually taking place and what we are supposed to be celebrating, which actually is a very introspective moment in the life of the Absolute. And we should be connected with that so we can accompany Bhagavan in this moment of great necessity, as he's showing us Jagannath in Ratha Yatra and so on. And as I like to mention, when you are the most vulnerable, as God can be, and as we are, or we can be, if you properly express your vulnerability in the proper context, that will create so much empowerment. And that's why we see Mahaprabhu is the most vulnerable face of the Absolute, but the most volcanic at the same time, paradoxically. And this cannot be applied to us as sadhakas as well. We need to properly express vulnerability so we can receive proper empowerment to continue growing in our devotional project, and in this way grasping in deeper and deeper ways all that this Ratha Yatra and Sri Jagannath Dev are about. So some words I wanted to share with you today regarding Sri Ratha Yatra, mainly in connection to Sri Kuruksetra Dhama. So I don't know if you may have any questions or something you may like to share. Here I'm putting my katha to Harikatha to rest for a minute at least.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. Sadhu, sadhu. Very nicely, very concisely, but very,
Dhanyavad, Haribol, Haribol.
I think very much appreciated by devotees. We've had the great fortune to discuss like this many times, so to see that this kind of mood is there in the heart of so many Vaishnavas, and that you made a very important point that this should be almost a prerequisite before each Ratha Yatra festival in any place. Then there should be like Adivas meditation day, that they should review this katha and everything, and then devotees, their mood will be enhanced, so their own bhakti will grow, and then the outspray of that to the general public will be more than just Sukriti files, but it will have some actual deeper bhakti samskar to the general public, because devotees' mood is also deeper. So very appreciated. So devotees, if they have any questions, of course, any comments or anything, more senior.
Actually, Mukunda, I just sent that article today by Srila Bhakti Pramod Puri Maharaj about the internal reasons for Ratha Yatra. And a lot of points Maharaj says he makes it in there. This is in Sringa Maharaj's site. So I actually emailed that out to a lot of the devotees today. So a lot of those points Maharaj touched on today. You know, so it was timely because I just sent it out about maybe 4 o'clock or so. You know, the internal meaning of Ratha Yatra.
Happy to hear that connection. And of course, I was not aware that you were saying taking darshan of Srila Puri Maharaj in the form of Harikatha, but I'm familiar with his exposition on this particular topic, and of course I hold that very, very dear to my heart. He's a very special person in my life. So I'm happy that somehow you connected whatever I said or something I've said with such a great personality. So that makes my exposition successful somehow. Thank you.
No, what you mentioned, because so many times, you know, and I'm in New York, and the Ratha Yatra is taking place, Ratha Yatra Festival on Saturday. And I remember years ago, I sat with Pradyumna Prabhu, who's an old Prabhupada.
Yeah, I know him.
He wanted to actually finish translating the Bhagavatam. And I asked him, how many people here do you think realize the importance of Ratha Yatra, the true meaning? He said, not many, if any. And it's a sad state where once Srila Bhakti Vallabhatirtha Goswami Maharaj was asked by our dear friend Puru Prabhu, who's passed away many years ago. This was in the early 2000s. And they asked Maharaj, did he want to speak? And he said, I don't speak in bazaars. And this is a real important point, because if devotees really want to come to a true understanding, they have to go deep. Srila Govinda Maharaj mentioned, if we simply stay on the surface, we'll simply catch fish. But we have to go deep, deep into the water, deep down to grasp the valuable jewels. So it takes a little dedication. It takes some sincere surrender. Because without that, it will never take place.
It's not so easy to swim into the depths of the ocean. We have to increase our swimming adhikar.
You have to have genuine sadhu sangha, or else it's not possible.
That's like the oxygen tube that will keep you alive, and you can be going to the depth of the ocean. If you don't have that oxygen tube, you will die very quickly trying to get there. So
Any questions?
Yes, Makunda. Can you tell us his name? Can you tell Maharaj's name? Namkaha?
Yes. Srila BP Padmanabha Maharaj.
Thank you.
And I know he's traveled out to California area before, so devotees may have met him out. I'm not sure. Maharaj, you've also gone to West Coast. I know devotees might have run across Sahadev Prabhu in California.
I've been in California only once in 2016. I went to visit my Guru Maharaj's ashram in in Mendocino County. Yeah, that has been the only time I've been there. I was only there for 2 weeks or so. Yeah, I've not had the chance of going again on that area. Yeah.
Is there any other questions or comments, devotees? You can unmute, but only one at a time, so we don't have, but anyone else, any questions or comments they want to make? Don't have to be shy.
People, I just had a question about, I was been reflecting on this and reading RATHA YATRA, and I started to realize that maybe I have no concept of transcendental body, but it was occurring to me that if Mahaprabhu's body is transcendental, I just want to make sure I have a proper understanding. So these effects of having transcendental body, like we should understand that on a real human body, it would probably not even be tolerable, or I don't know. I just wanted to understand that aspect too, because his body is transcendental, correct? Mahaprabhu.
Mm-hmm. So if I heard correctly, because I was not able to fully hear, you were asking regarding Mahaprabhu's different ecstatic symptoms?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
okay.
That related to the fact that his body is
yeah.
And how we understand that.
Yeah. In one sense, I would say there's not too much place to try to understand that in one sense, because of course, that's quite transrational. That goes way beyond our immediate experience with our own bodies, or even seeing some other advanced practitioners exhibiting different symptoms. It is said that nobody exhibited the symptoms that Mahaprabhu exhibited in the whole religious history, to the extreme degree that he did. Actually, in one point, Srila Rupa Goswami, with his describing some of these symptoms in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he will say, and there are many other symptoms which are way more extraordinary, but I won't describe them because they are so extraordinary that probably you will never see them. And Jiva Goswami, if I'm not mistaken, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comment to that section, they mentioned basically, okay, those are the symptoms that Mahaprabhu exhibited. Those that Rupa Goswami consider there's no need to enter into these details because this is out of this world completely. And that's what we see in the Ante-lila of Chaitanya Charitamrita. Basically, there's not too much instruction there, if you will, as there is in the Madhya Lila. In Ante-lila, basically, we have Mahaprabhu going to a swoon and experiencing all these ecstatic symptoms. It's not something we can imitate, if you will, or we can do. No, it's just like the consequence of what's going on in his heart. And of course, his body is completely transcendental. And that's why we could say, poetically, many acharyas have depicted like that, when Krishna expressed his desire of descending as Mahaprabhu and tasting Radha Bhav, Sri Radha will tell him, I won't give you that Bhav, because if I give you my Bhav, you don't have an idea what you're asking for. If I give you my Bhav, you will roll on the ground, you will cry, you will hit your head, who knows where, and I cannot tolerate that your soft body, we know these many statements where the gopis are expressing how much they suffer only to think that the foot soles of Krishna may be pricked by some little stone on the forest and so on. So what to speak about Sri Radha herself thinking Krishna falling on the ground over and over again as she does next in separation from him. And that's when she says, okay, I'll give you this bhav, but the condition is that I will embrace you and cover with my own complexion, which is a way of saying I'll be receiving those experiences, not you, because I cannot tolerate that your soft body may receive any type of bruises or anything. So in this way, we sometimes say Radha Bhava Dyutishu Balitam. The Krishna is appearing with the mood of Radha and with the hue of the complexion of Sri Radha, which is Mahaprabhu's Krishna being embraced with Radhas. So she's the one receiving what he's experiencing. But yeah, that's completely transcendental. And it's not something that we can imitate. It's not something that we can, I will say even, I've seen in some devotees, of course, this depends on the particular adhikar, but some devotees with not that much adhikar, they try to think too much about these symptoms, and they may get even like discouraged, or like thinking things like, I don't want to end like that. I wouldn't like to, that the goal of life is that much suffering and pain and so on. They may only see the externals of that. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami will say in this connection, Bahya Bisra Jalahai Bitare Anandamai Krishnera Adbhuta Charit, which basically means Bahya Bisra Jala, externally, Krishna Prem seems like poison. It may seem to the untrained eye as something undesirable, but Vitari Anandamai. But internally, if you go beyond the surface, it's full of Ananda. And he concludes saying Krishna Prema Adbhuta Charit. So these are the astonishing features of Krishna Prem. When externally may seem one thing, but it's actually the opposite. So in this way, we have to train our eye, our ear, our heart, by properly understanding what's actually taking place. And also, as Srila Sridhar Maharaj will say, there is possible to experience sweetness in pain. So Mahaprabhu is showing so much pain, being in Radha Bhav, in separation from Krishna. Separation is the way to enter. The low tide of separation invokes the high tide of union, if you want to speak in terms of embankment of separation, like Gaur Govinda Maharaj will say. So he will be tasting this suffering, but that's a sweet suffering, interestingly. So it may sound paradoxical for us, contradictory. So gradually we have a sadhakas to, to develop a capacity to harmonize these apparent contradictions, to integrate complexity, to deal with paradoxes in such a way that these higher realities become more and more plausible to us, more realistic, more understandable. But yeah, basically what Mahaprabhu is exhibiting is not something that anyone else can exhibit, basically, to put it in a few words.
There's also
on that. I appreciate it.
Yes, Manini, also one important point, even from a transcendental point of view, what ecstasy Mahaprabhu was experiencing is not even in the body of other transcendental bodies.
Exactly.
It's very unique. So in the context of things, is Mahaprabhu tasting what was the mood of Radhika. So this is called Madana Bhav. And that Madana Bhav only takes place in Radhika. So even other transcendental bodies of other eternal associates and so forth will not display the moods that Mahaprabhu displayed. So later, in some time in Bhajan maturation, everything, and maybe under guidance in some study, in Ujjami Mani, it's explained like that. Sava Bhava Gamalakhe Madanaya Paratparo. That's this verse. Prajayate Ladini Sara Radayam Eva Yasada. That it only appears in Radhika and continuously appears in Radhika. So was some symptom in the overall Leela of Mahaprabhu that he tasted actually what is Radhika's mood, in his mercy is that it was revealed, because in Krishna Leela, though these moods take place in Radhika, you don't read in Bhagavatam how this happens. Something may be there, like in Ahang Sadut, something you can get, but in Bhagavatam in general, it's not described. And it says at some point, when the ecstasy is so high, there'll be murchit. Murchit means fainting. So Radhika can't describe. Also, the Manjaris who vicariously experience it, they also can't describe, because vicariously they also faint. So, but in Gaur Leela, for the first time, this is exhibited. So it's something to really be relished at very high level of adhikar, right? So we can appreciate, oh my gosh, how merciful is Mahaprabhu, that he revealed it, right? And then, but there's no tasting of that for us. Even if we had a transcendental body, that's not going to ever be our status. But as
I understand that.
The mood to serve that is what is so great. That Mahaprabhu revealed the possibility of savor to that mood. This is Babulas Rati or Manjari Bhav. So very wonderful Leela. Very wonderful display.
Yes. And also the emphasis on the seva part was really pretty amazing. Thank you so much. Haribol.
Thank you so much.
A very wonderful part of Maharaj's Katha. Very wonderful.
Thank you so much for your contribution.
I just want to say the perspective of like you said, saving the Lord's life on a daily basis. I mean, it's like mind-boggling. But when you read Chaitanya Charitamrita, that is what you realize, especially by Antya Lila, you know, when he's in those pastimes. It's pretty astonishing.
Yeah.
People.
Yeah, and of course, I didn't say.
It's a matter of assimilation.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Maharaj.
No, sorry. You continue.
No, it's a matter of what we can assimilate and digest.
Yeah.
It's not within our capacity
Mm-hmm.
to obtain that thing.
Yeah. Of
It's your
course.
we're very small and minute.
Yeah.
And only by grace and mercy, maybe we can get the capacity to be able to even conceive of it.
Exactly.
Not even a question of experiencing it, just to be able to conceive of it is mercy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we don't have that capacity. Radha and Krishna's Leela is going on in Mahaprabhu. That's taking place, and it's eternal.
Mm-hmm.
So we may not be privy to it, but for devotees to think, well, I don't want to go, and who said you can go there? It's not like we walk and enter into that, yes, I'll experience that. No, we won't.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
We have to know our limitations.
Yeah, it's a descending process. And as you mentioned, of course, what I mentioned, that our part of our eternal seva will be helping to save the life of our our deities, if you will, is not to foster a false sense of I'm so special or I'm so capable or nothing like that. But basically, as you were mentioning, how great is the grace and the gift and the mercy that can come to us, that eventually we will be invited to render that type of service, not because of our constitutional capacity, but our potential in connection to such a source of mercy as it is Sriman Mahaprabhu and so on. And my point is, if we accept the degree of mercy that Mahaprabhu is extending to us, then we will be seriously commit ourselves to, okay, whatever, to whatever extent that mercy will take me, to whatever situation that mercy is inviting me, I'm willing to honor that properly. And of course, in the dynamics of the Leela, that will take the form of, on a daily basis, trying to assist through our Guru Varga, of course, and eternal associates, this project of facilitating the meeting of the divine couple in Braj, and therefore making them, saving their life, which of course is an always successful project. They will never die. But the dynamics of the Leela are such that the highest level of commitment is expected from us. So I try to make that point in the sense of course, we are almost bordering non-existence, as Srila Sridhar Maharaj once said. We're so atomic, but at the same time, bhakti is so incredibly powerful, especially coming from our Gaudiya Sampradaya, that it can create such an interesting situation. The most insignificant jiva being empowered by bhakti to the point of being instrumental in saving God's life on a daily basis. So that's, if properly understood, that's totally humbling, and that's totally serious and deep, and it's demanding our greatest commitment. So it's not something just to relax or to become proud or anything like that. No, so I wanted just to make that clear. I mean, I'm not saying that you misunderstood my words, but it's, I know it may sound like a bold statement, but it has its own logic and humility again in it. So there is a way to speak and to think or conceive the things in a way that humility is fostered and our commitment is increased, for sure. Yeah.
Any other questions? I think I heard somebody was about to ask a question. Didi, I think, was about to ask a question.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Very nice lecture. And like whatever I heard from him, or we are listening from other Maharaj, and even in Chaitanya Charitamrita, whole Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Leela, was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to relish the Madanakhya Mahabhav, but he, like, it's not for the sadhus, through the Rup Goswami. He wanted to give the process to the conditioned soul so that we can serve Jival Kishore by understanding his mood. So it's like whatever not for us to maybe understand is the right word, but not to do that. We have to only that's why you chose this Goswami, that what is the process that we can do the sadhana bhajan to serve that need. So that is the true meaning, and even the way Mahaprabhu is there, Bhumipati Prabhu, and even everybody, you all always say that it is a descending process. From one hand, which is up in the air, he is relative, and from another hand, which is down, he is giving the process, and that also he is not given to himself. He was busy in the process for which he came. He put all his power in the heart of Rupa Goswami, and the Rupa Goswami gave us the process that how we are going to serve that need. So this is the whole gist of the Chaitanya said. There are so much things. Even I like the Maharaj, that last sentence, that every day, every moment, Radha and Krishna is dying. And yes, that's a very bold statement, that being a devotee or being a sadhak, we are trying to help our own Radha. That is not so simple. So this will not be popped up that we can do. We are very, very infinitesimal particle to help Lord, but yes, we should try our best to do our sadhana so that we can be helpful to serve Him. So,
yeah, that was very beautiful.
the concept I understand.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate your contribution, and of course, again, I totally agree with you. Just mentioning what will be our situation in the Nitya Lila is just a long-term goal, but it will be realistic if we are applying ourselves as sadhakas in our sadhana today with Saranagati, with following third verse of Sikshastakam as we were speaking these days. Because of course we can speak about this high topic in so many times, so many ways, but at the same time we have to walk the talk, as they say, and we have to really have integrity in our bhajan, and that will show how much we actually are willing to offer ourselves to serve in whatever necessity may be there. And it all begins at the feet of Srila Gurudev in connection with the sadhus and the Vaishnavas, and through that we have to prove to ourselves, if you will, how much we are willing to actually embrace all these incredible ideals that we can, as one of the devotees mentioned before, we can even only conceive of them by divine grace, and we can never even imagine for ourselves about the reality such as Krishna Lila, Gaur Lila, even if in our wildest imagination, it just happened out of Avaroha Panta, or the descending process. So yes, many of these realities, as you were mentioning, Mahaprabhu in the Gambhira, which is quite parallel also to Sri Radha's experience in the Brahmara Gita, all the things in many ways are to hear about them, knows that something like that exists, and that make that melt our heart and feel ourselves so fortunate and humbled by such a gift that is knocking on our doors, despite we have no merit, at least myself, no merit to deserve such a thing at all. So we can be really moved by the principle of causeless grace, and of course engaging in bhajan with full sincerity, full dedication. So thank you so much for adding to that.
Any last questions or stuff like that? We're at 8:30. I know we'll definitely go over a little bit, no harm. So any last questions or something?
Haribol?
Your time. Haribol, did you?
Yeah, so I just wanted to share that I had discovered a text from Manini Radha sending me the Charitamrita, the Chaitanya Charitamrita on audio, and so I've been listening to it for the last long weekend. Last weekend was a holiday weekend, and then I traveled this weekend, so I'm able to. It's nice that I feel like I'm able to absorb a lot of this, but I had a little bit of confusion about Lord Jagannath, and then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's
Mahaprabhu's dad is also Jagannath. I was a little confused, but I spoke with Prem today, and it just all meshed together when she explained me the difference between, because I was like, wait, well, yeah, anyway, so that was a little bit confusing because I thought, well, wait a minute, who's this? I thought Lord Jagannath was actually the dad, but that's Krishna. And anyway, it's just been like perfect timing, pretty auspicious timing. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You can ask Maharaj. So Maharaj, she had some confusion. She's more new to Bhakti, and she's asking about the Jagannath Mishra versus Lord Jagannath.
Sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
Yeah, she was asking. She's some new to Bhakti. Very sweet devotee. She lives in Colorado.
Yes.
And very sweet devotee, Yashoda. And she was asking that she's recently gotten some tape recordings, basically from one of our other devotees who's more senior, some. And she was trying to understand the difference between Jagannath Mishra and Lord Jagannath.
Oh, I see. Yeah, but what I could hear, that was harmonized somehow. But of course, I can briefly mention some words, as you maybe have heard. Jagannath Mishra is the father of Sriman Mahaprabhu, while Jagannath is Jagannath, the deity that we have been speaking about, that you will find in Jagannath Puri. So of course the name is the same, at least the beginning name, and you will find that in many places, many times different similar names with Jagannath and Krishna and Madhava and so on. But sometimes one is the name of God and the other one is the name of the devotee of God, as many of us have different names, spiritual devotional names, and all of those names are names of God. But of course, at the end, there is the word Das, Dasi, who clarifies the confusion, the possible confusion. So in the same way, Jagannath on one side is this manifestation of Krishna in Jagannath Puri, ecstatic form, Mahabhav Prakash, that we have been explaining today a little bit. But Jagannath Mishra, although the name is similar, Jagannath Mishra is the father of Mahaprabhu in the Leela, eternal father of Mahaprabhu. In other words, Nanda Maharaj in Gaur Leela in Navadvip, appearing along with Sachi Devi. So they are the parents of Sri Gauranga Dev in Navadvip. So basically, that will be in very brief words, since we are already on time, a brief little bit way of explaining the difference between the two.
Also, just a quick announcement, and then Anuradha on because she can do kirtan, but also for the intensive, we are pretty much, I'm not at capacity, so to speak, but we have as many people as we did last year. And I think there are still ability to get rooms, but the room that we use for a simple room will be, because local devotees will also come, so we're getting up near capacity for that. So if anybody still wants to come, to reach out to me. I know a few people I kept in mind already that if they're sharing a room or something, it's okay. But Virginia Nandan Prabhu and his good wife, I think that they also may be coming now. And so we are back up to those numbers we had last year. So just keep in mind, if you're planning on coming to please let me know, pretty soon, so we can kind of try to organize ourselves and everything in terms of how many people we have. Is Anuradha on? Yes. Dhanavad, did you some kirtan a little bit?
Do you have a specific bhajan?
No, just Maha Mantra, because we're already at 8:35. Okay.
Okay.
And also, before we even do that, we also, I know there's always many devotees on, and so collectively, on their behalf, I'm so much offering out Dandavat to Maharaj for taking time to share with us and to let us have his association for Hari Katha, such wonderful Hari Katha, and to keep our mood nourished, because simultaneously stayed on track with what we've been discussing regarding RATHA YATRA Katha and Mahaprabhu, and such a elegant and very insightful and personal way also, but still so much as the remnants of our acharyas. So it was very, very wonderful. I hope all devotees really, really appreciate it. And we want to thank Maharaj very much for coming on. Of course, for devotees who are here, most of the devotees don't live here, we're on the phone. And for those who are here, of course, Maharaj is going to do Harikatha at the temple on Saturday again at 6, and then, of course, at a regular Sunday program, which is around 10:30, 11.
Thank you.
All right, Anuradha Didi.
Jai. Gaur Hari Bol.